Call of Duty, released in 2003, marked a significant shift in the first-person shooter landscape. Initially, it was created as a response to the popular Medal of Honor series and was heavily inspired by World War II movies. Interestingly enough, many of Medal of Honor's lead developers left to form what we know today as Infinity Ward, the studio behind many Call of Duty titles. The first installment sold approximately 4 million copies, setting the stage for one of gaming's most successful franchises. While Call of Duty initially focused on its single-player campaign, multiplayer gameplay did not become the focal point until Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare. This 2007 release revolutionized online gaming, introducing millions of players to a dynamic multiplayer experience where different playstyles, such as sniping, trickshotting, and tryharding, which we'll focus more on today, began to flourish, along with the casual gamer who didn't necessarily fall into any of these categories, but they still made up a majority of the player base, providing a rich, diverse community. From its inception, competition has been at the heart of the Call of Duty experience. What began as local LAN tournaments during the Call of Duty 4 era evolved into the global, highly competitive tournaments that we see today. The competitive community, while relatively small compared to the broader player base, has steadily grown each year alongside the rise of esports. To better define the tryhard playstyle, it would be players who exhibit intense focus and dedication to mastering the game, and that playstyle became more prominent from around Modern Warfare 2, 2009 to Black Ops 2. This period saw a surge in content creators showcasing their skills and strategies, pushing the envelope to what was possible in the game. As a result, the community saw a major shift. Both casual and competitive players began to evolve. As each installment introduced more advanced mechanics, like sliding, bunny hopping, and even jetpacks at one point, players were forced to adapt or risk falling behind. This evolution meant that the casual player base became more skilled, while the tryhards continued to push the boundaries of high-level gameplay. There used to be a time where the casual player Frank and his 70-inch TV with Dolby surround sound and default settings could come home after a long 10-hour shift with a beer and just game, get a few kills, run into a couple tryhards, win some close games, and that was a fine way to end the day for him. Flash forward to where we are now, and it seems like 80% of all Call of Duty lobbies are filled with tryhards. Nowadays, everywhere you go, no matter the game mode, there is a player abusing every mechanic, using the best guns, jumping and sliding around every corner, and utilizing their equipment tactically. This naturally pushes Frank the casual player away, as he now realizes the casual game he once knew was gone, and he moves on. And I agree, that does hurt the game, but I also don't believe that Frank is representative of every casual gamer, with most casuals really stepping up their game and evolving with each title. This of course does mean that the average tryhard is better too, but I feel that these are positive and healthy changes for a game. I personally love the idea of my opponents getting better as I get better. I shouldn't always want to beat down on bad players. I know I personally wouldn't get as much satisfaction from playing if that were the case. Whether it's casual or ranked play, I'd be bringing my mechanical best regardless. I'm pretty good at the game, but I've also been playing for about a decade, and I'm sure a lot of you probably have as well. And honestly, you probably are just as good. So I'm sure most would agree, it's always going to be more fun shooting against opponents who can shoot back than those who cannot. I personally have above average stats, and most of my games are filled with players trying really hard with meta guns and purchased skins, but then there are moments where I'm playing some noobs, and honestly, I have just as much fun playing versus tryhards as I do dropping nukes on worse players, or on the rare occasion, dropping nukes versus tryhards. I can understand that I'm somewhat part of the minority here, as I'm a super competitive person and have been playing Call of Duty for a very long time. I guess I'm in the middle here, because I work a full-time job, but I also try and play ranked play till I reach the highest rank every single season. I usually smoke while I play, and nowadays I don't even really use a headset, I just use my computer speakers because I'm too lazy to plug in a headset, and my headset's kinda bad. I know there are players just like me who can relate to that. So, like I said earlier, I'm kind of in the middle here and can see both sides, but with Black Ops 6 around the corner, I'm a little anxious to think about the amount of players that are going to be pushed out of the casual scene as more dominant players, content creators, professional players, and these new movement players become the majority. I don't want the casual player to quit, but I think with such a fast-paced shooter like COD, and with the introduction of the omnidirectional movement, the era of the casual player has begun to change yet again, and they themselves are getting even better. I hope that with the Black Ops 6 release, the skill-based matchmaking will be redesigned to better protect the casual gamer. Allow the player to have a say in whether or not they want harder lobbies by giving them the option to turn off or on skill-based matchmaking. Because as it stands right now, it's totally unreasonable for a casual player to have a few good games, then be playing up against Optic Scump in the next match. A system where a player could choose if they want their matchmaking experience to be full of tryhards or not would be best. If a player opts to have skill-based matchmaking turned off, then they'll be subject to the typical style of gameplay that we're used to today. But then on the other hand, if a player wants as much competition in casual play as possible, they can opt to have their skill-based matchmaking turned on and play against similarly skilled players. For really good players, this could result in longer queue times, sure, but in casual play, I think it's kind of good as it can persuade players who only try hard in casual play to potentially explore ranked play, and that can help motivate the casual player to improve at their own pace without feeling like they're being completely left behind. At this time, I don't believe there is a true skill-based matchmaking algorithm in play. Instead, the skill-based matchmaking we experience today is much more retention-based than truly skill-based, with things like connection, playlist diversity, which is essentially the amount of playlists available to the player at any given time, the time it takes to connect to a match, recent maps and game modes, input devices, whether or not voice chat is turned on or off, and finally, player skill to round off Call of Duty's very complex matchmaking system. I'm not necessarily here to delve super deeply into Call of Duty's algorithm, but basic common sense leads me to believe that with all of the data Activision collects from us every year, their focus appears to be in keeping players engaged for as long as possible, maximizing the opportunity for players to potentially buy operators, guns, camos, and various expansion packs. I think it's important that Activision prioritize players so that they can feel like they can use whatever weapons they want, so that they can feel like they can attempt any challenge and play however they want without constantly feeling that the skill difference is too big to compete against other players, because overall that does hurt the game. Now, we're seeing more casual players become tryhards, or at least they're much better than they were before, with most players knowing how to slide cancel and display more mechanical skill than ever before. Gamers in general have gotten a lot better, and the gap between tryhards and casuals are getting shorter and shorter, and I honestly enjoy the idea of that. Again, maybe I'm the minority here, but I think the constant competition is good for games that are fundamentally competitive. Activision should also redesign their skill-based matchmaking system to be more efficient and cater to players, instead of being a system that works in the background so that most of matchmaking is vague and up to interpretation. That's really it. Those are my honest opinions on tryhards versus casuals. I think that over time, the gap is going to close to the point where you can't even tell the average tryhard to the casual player. And then, hopefully, the really tryhard players are encouraged to just go play ranked. I also hope Activision tries to create a more balanced skill-based matchmaking system, and not this engagement-based matchmaking system where retention is the priority and proper skill-based matchmaking takes a back seat, because that definitely hurts the game. I think Black Ops 6 is going to contain a lot of fun and amazing moments, and this community will really start to come together, as the last releases of COD, in my opinion, damaged the community quite a bit, with the removal of some foundational features such as red dots, dead silence, and adding an absurd amount of aim assist. I'd like to think that this year will be unifying for all players, despite all the skill-based matchmaking issues that may exist in the background, and no better time to do that than with a Treyarch release.